You know, guys, I believe that you have really nice pizza right now. Anyway, so I'm gonna ask you some questions just to make it more warm. Do you know what startup is? What do you think? What it is, startup? We just want to talk about startup today. What's thoughts? What do you think it may be?
Starting a new enterprise or new business.
Right. Where else? What do you think? I mean, something more concrete. I mean, starting, that's okay, but for example, 200 people you have, is it startup or not? 500 people. Do we know some limits?
I don't think there is no limit. I mean, you can start up with a single match. It's possible.
Yeah, right. I'm just, you know, to be clear, so no clear-cut rule. So startup may be even Facebook, as it was, 1,000 people before IPO, like 5 or 6 years ago. Okay, startup is something in between. You just started the company, just registered it, and maybe up to 1,000 people and even more. Okay, now we just talking about IT startups, so IT industry. Everybody knows that the capital of IT business in the world is Silicon Valley, which is a nice, really cool place near us. Okay, why it's possible to be? Three things make it possible. The first, it's really a place with a whole bunch of great ideas. It means Stanford, so they have an ideas. Private entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs was, like now it's Elon Musk, and also these great people who can organize everything. And of course venture capitals. And what the most important, they based just across the street to each other. So just in one place, really small place of land, but trillions of dollars market in there. Okay. Third point, what is current challenge for this business? The current challenge is, you know, it's emerging, it's growing really fast. So they have a lot of ideas, a lot of thousands of new companies registered every year in Silicon Valley and so on. What is the current trend? They need some programmers. They need talented people who can write all this stuff and create it. So now in the US, more than 200,000 jobs for IT programmers. For example, if Google will come to hiring agency in the US and ask about, we need some Java programmer for us, they will answer that, okay, no problem, but you should wait from 12 to 16 months.
As an attorney in Finland at Bird & which is this multinational British law firm. We're known for our expertise in IT and technology law, which is the field I work in too. A lot of our clients, obviously, they're big corporations too, but we do a lot of work with startups. And in the Nordics, currently, there's a very active startup scene. It's centered, I would say, mostly around university. At least in Finland, there are a lot of startup sort of entrepreneurship clubs and associations and activities run by the universities, and that has been a real grassroots sort of success project in the Nordics. I think it got started in the Aalto University of Finland, which is like this combination university of business schools and polytechnic schools and industrial design. And that got started maybe, I would say, maybe 5 to 6 years ago, and it's been a real success. And there's really this booming startup economy right now. There are a lot of conferences being held. There's this one in Finland, appropriately called Slush, which is sort of marketed under the tagline of not the Californian sun, but honest slush. And that's what we have in Finland. But that's a very good one. It's grown very much. I think I have some statistics here that I just took up. But it's a huge event. There were 15,000 attendees last year in Helsinki, and from over 100 countries and 2,000 startups. And it's been a big success, and it's been growing very fast. And they've been doing now sister shows in Tokyo and Beijing, and now I think they're expanding to Shanghai and Singapore this year. So it's been really growing. We also have some other conferences such as Arctic Startup and a lot of happening going down there. As for what the Nordic success stories are, I mean, there's a lot of business going on. I guess our best successes have been maybe in the mobile gaming area. I mean, I have to name drop these, even though, as you said, I mean, what is a startup anymore? We have Rovio, which does Angry Birds, of course, and Supercell, which does Clash of Clans. The Swedes have King.com, which does Candy Crush. So it's like everything you're doing on your mobile phone, maybe except for Pokemon Go. That's not us. So we've been very successful in that. Like in the past years, also Mojang, which does Minecraft. That's a Swedish startup. Way back, of course, we had the in Sweden they had the Pirate Bay, of course, and Kazan, MuTorrent, which I don't know if they qualify as startups, but for example, the founders of the latter two.
My name is Brian, I'm from Ireland. Like Mikhail, I want to discuss my country, Ireland, and I think it might be of interest to you guys because you're a set of very accomplished transnational sort of lawyers, and I think Ireland presents a certain unique set of opportunities to the likes of you. So I just want to give a brief background to Ireland's recent economic growth. So it's coming out of a pretty bad recession which began in 2008. You know, we have still the highest debt to GDP ratio in Europe. Yet, nonetheless, we now also have the highest growth rate of any economy in Europe. And the startup industry is a large part responsible for that growth. The startup ecosystem in Ireland is growing day by day. At the moment, it has 973 startups, 143 multinationals, 69 venture capital companies, 54 incubators and 19 accelerators. That's all for a country with a population of 4 million. You know, so if we're talking per capita, we're actually quite a big economy in that sense. It all began back in 2002 when Google first moved its European headquarters to Dublin. The effect that that had was really just to set a precedent for other big companies who were looking for places to host their European headquarters. Facebook, Twitter, and any number of other companies followed Google's example and came to Dublin to set up their headquarters. The main areas in Dublin where these startups are located are City West and the Silicon Docks, which is a fairly new name for an area in Dublin near the city centre. It's very chic and very modern, and it has about 7,000 tech employees in total working in that area, along with all the attendant infrastructure necessary to startups like law firms and accountants, etc., etc. So there's really a lot of opportunity there, I think, for international lawyers. A lot of people who go and work there are international people who've been headhunted or who've decided to take it upon themselves to go there and look into the opportunities available. So there's three main reasons for or behind Ireland's startup industry and the growth rate that it's experienced recently. The first one, and I would say the primary one, is the corporate tax rate. We've got the lowest corporate tax rate in Europe. It's 12.5%. And that is many of the big companies who come to Dublin actually don't even pay that rate. They pay something closer to 0% because they have fancy arrangements whereby they can offshore their tax liabilities. Another big reason is the seed funding. Like I already mentioned the statistics about venture capitalists. You've got a lot of private seed funding as well as public semi-state institutions like Enterprise Ireland that is really doing its best to sort of help budding entrepreneurs, get that first foot on the first rung and help grow their company. And also the final reason is the human capital that's available there. Dublin is really a wonderful city, and I say that not just because it's where I'm from. It's really a fun, beautiful, diverse place. We have the advantage of being a member of the EU, unlike the UK now. So it means that a lot of people who go there have taken advantage of the free movement within the EU, which that allows for. We also have the youngest population in Europe at the moment, which really means that there's a sense of like, this is really a nascent phenomenon. Ireland is just beginning as a startup economy. And I think that the best is yet to come. As international lawyers, something that's worth looking into in the long run if you are interested in startups. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions and then we move to the questions, okay? These for all the panel. What role does the IP lawyer play at the various stages of the life cycle of a startup? Who wants to start?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think if you really want to do it by the book, and if you have good resources and ample time, which you never have, I think the absolute first step for an IP lawyer is to work with the founders to sort of map out the IP environment of the business the startup is in, and maybe their resources, and work out an IP strategy for the startup to see like what is protectable, what should they focus on, what's maybe more peripheral. For example, I mean, if you have a startup that, let's say, really does research and they would need to patent those results, then you would need to focus on that. On the other hand, there are many startups, I guess, that are really, how to put it, maybe not that innovative, but very good at executing a certain type of business. And in that sense, if you have that kind of a startup or that kind of a business, you don't want to really lose your mind over not being able to patent something or whatever, but rather focus on the execution and maybe the branding and you know how you differentiate yourself from your competitors via branding. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that. Otherwise, I would say at the start phase, of course, is to ensure that the startup's IP portfolio is actually intact, that the company actually owns the IP to its products and services and whatever happens. Because what happens a lot of times is that a lot of these startups use external consultants with, you know, maybe only oral agreements or whatever, when they have a friend come up and code a service or something for them, and then it's quite unclear who actually owns the IP. So I think that's another very central thing that a lawyer can provide.
Okay. Another question is, from a lawyer's perspective, how to run a financially solid legal practice advising startups as their finances are really limited. What do you do?
Shall I start again? All right. That's actually, I think, a question that many law firms struggle with. I guess, I mean, I can say that we struggle with that too all the time. And I've been asking that question a lot around here, how that works. And of course, the problem is that working in a bigger law firm, you obviously have like the pressure to build and to do an actual solid business to be able to get forward. And that does not go very well with at least very initial phase startups that actually don't have any cash. And so I don't think there's any magic bullet solution to that one. What can be done is fee deferrals, for example, that you agree to do something sort of for credit, and if they receive money further down the line, then you'll be able to bill it. The other option, of course, is just to do pro bono and hope that once the financing rounds start coming in, you'll be able to be, you know, an advisor in those rounds and then bill at your normal rate, for example. Then, of course, one path is to do really standardized services and try to keep the scope of your services very standard and very quick, so that you can sort of like do it in a very organized manner, and you know the scope already, so you can sell it rather more cheaply. I think those are the ones. I know some firms take stakes in startup firms too, so they have like sweat equity. We don't do that, but I know that's something that's being done here too.
Yeah.
If I may comment, I would say that's a very good piece of advice generally to startups, if you think about that, not just IP-wise, because it's like, as you said, it's like once they start out, it's fun, you know, just to have a group of friends and everyone's coding all the time and eating pizza and whatever and having a great time. But when the first investment rounds come, of course, the investors are very likely to do a due diligence inspection to the firm, and after that, if you can't even find the documents or if it's unclear, it might not push the investor away, actually. They might still do it, but what I always say to my clients is that, you know, make your company easy to invest in and have your documents in order, and so that you have the good answers, like you know, in your back pocket already. Good resources and ample time, which you never have. I think the absolute first step for an IP lawyer is to work with the founders to sort of map out the IP environment of the business the startup is in, and maybe their resources, and work out an IP strategy for the startup to see like what is protectable, what should they focus on, what's maybe more peripheral. For example, I mean, if you have a startup that, let's say, really does research and they would need to patent those results, then you would need to focus on that. On the other hand, there are many startups, I guess, that are really, how to put it, maybe not that innovative, but very good at executing a certain type of business. And in that sense, if you have that kind of a startup or that kind of a business, you don't want to really lose your mind over not being able to patent something or whatever, but rather focus on the execution and maybe the branding and you know how you differentiate yourself from your competitors via branding. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that. Otherwise, I would say at the start phase, of course, is to ensure that the startup's IP portfolio is actually intact, that the company actually owns the IP to its products and services and whatever happens. Because what happens a lot of time is that a lot of these startups use external consultants with, you know, maybe only oral agreements or whatever, when they have a friend come up and code a service or something for them, and then it's quite unclear who actually owns the IP. So I think that's another very central thing that a lawyer can provide.
California, I know, permits that, so you can receive equity in exchange for legal services that you provide to startups early on. And I think that's a very attractive thing for a lot of lawyers. I happen to know as well that a lot of firms here really are very aware of this sort of state of early stage startups. You know, they understand that oftentimes they're living off of ramen and, you know, instant coffee, and they don't really expect you to pay exorbitant fees. They know that, you know, later down the line the relationship may pay off, but early on they're not going to be asking you to pay exorbitant fees. And I've noticed that many of the very big prestigious firms in California are actually very amenable to small, you know, fresh-faced college grads coming and saying, we need your help, you know, will you accept this? And they'll make arrangements. So I definitely think that the law firms have adapted to startups in that way.
To comment on this, I mean, you know, you should remember about, you know, in 5 years, there are only 10% out of 100, you know, with this, and in 10 years, only 1%. Okay, it's possible, I mean, to pay you in stars, that's really risky.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, startups certainly are incredibly risky as a proposition in general. Yeah, so obviously you should not be accepting equity in a firm if you don't think it's going to succeed. Another thing I'd say is that you know, startups, there's a new phenomenon, I think that's, I don't know, I think it's common knowledge now, or at least I've seen it dotted around different blogs and such, and it's the phenomenon of the lean startup. So typically startups, there is a line of thought according to which the success of a startup is measured by how much capital it raises. But I think in some ways that's sort of misguided. At best, that's a provisional measure of how good an idea the startup is, you know. But I don't really think that it's something that you should bank on when assessing whether a startup has been successful or not. Really, well, in my opinion, whether a startup is successful is determined by whether it's economically productive. You know, is it generating revenue? And early on in the startup, sometimes they don't generate revenue right away, but they also aren't beholden to anyone. That's what the lean startup is. Right? So all the revenue that it produces, be it through ads or whatever the service the startup is providing, is invested back into the company. And these sort of startups avoid angel investors principally because they don't like the idea of some external agent coming in and taking over control of the startup. So I think in that case as well, there's obviously going to be the problem for lawyers. If a lean startup is lean, it's not earning that much, how are they going to pay? But I think again, there are law firms that are making arrangements that are figuring a workaround for this.